So hello everybody, today I'm going to have a speech about an event that maybe some of us might have known before. It is the Chernobyl disaster that occurred on April 26, 1986. It took place in the Ukraine and it was basically an explosion of a nuclear power station. And we might have heard about this before since it has recently been dramatized into an HBO series called Chernobyl. So if you're interested in the event, you can watch the series. But the question is, why do I come up with this topic for today's video? It's because the impacts that the explosion created back then still affecting our today's lives. So how does it affecting us, and what kind of effect that we feel? That is what I'm going to cover. So in this speech, I'm going to cover how the Chernobyl disaster made changes into the civilization from its background story, the direct impacts that happened right after the explosion, and also the long-term effect that we still feel until today. The first one will be the background story. So back then, after the World War II, Soviet Union, they invested a lot heavy in the nuclear power station. So they built the stations about 10 miles to the north of Chernobyl. In totals, there are 4 reactors that they built, and it was able to produce about 1,000 megawatts, which was big, and it started to operate since the 1977. But what happened exactly was on the night before the explosion, which is on April 25th, 1986, 2 workers were trying to run some tests on the 4th reactor for some routine maintenance. But when they were trying to run the tests, they were then found out that they were sleep deprived, and also they violated some safety protocols that results in some excess steam that filled up some pipes, and because of the tension that was created, it then became an explosion in the morning. And so what are the direct impacts after the explosion? It was firstly, of course, some people died because of the explosion, especially the 2 workers and also other workers that got the radiation sickness, and also the firemen who were trying to put off the fire. They also got radiation sickness. And then next thing that they got, the next impact that they got is that the exposure of radioactive materials that happened to be the result of the core of the reactor got exposed into the air. So the radioactive materials got spewed all over the atmosphere, and so they have to evacuate the whole neighborhood around. So it became a very silent city, dead city, right after the explosion. And also this explosion costs almost $135 billion, and not to mention 1/4 of an active agricultural land in the modern Belarus also got destroyed because of the radiation and also the explosion. And so the third thing will be the long term. What do we get because of the explosion? The first one is the zone is not and will not be habitable for at least 20,000 years after the explosion, which was crazy, and it'll be a useless land that the Ukraine cannot make use of, which was a pity. And also the second one will be the atmosphere contamination of the radioactive materials. And the bad news is it got absorbed into the air, into the water, and also land that we consume today. So at least we have small pieces of those radioactive materials in our body already. And what happened if we got exposed to so much of radiation? The third thing is the cancers, or the health impacts directly is cancers. We got cancers. For example, thyroid cancers that the people there got right after the explosion because they got exposed to the radioactive materials directly. And the impacts is that some people will get future disabilities, and also babies can grow up into disabled person, which was not what we want. And so those are the background story and also direct and long-term impacts that the Chernobyl disaster made back in the 1986. So we can conclude that those things that happened in the history, they still affect our future. They still affect our lives today. So and also for your information, the other three reactions. And so for your information, the other three reactors that were built there, they got closed by December 2000 for respect of the explosion. And so I think that's all that I can share with you today. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you next time. Bye.